whatever. So, morning everybody. I'm Andrey. I'll be talking about Ember and Rails. I try my best to not talk only about Ember and tried my best to cover a bit of Rails, but not to be a big fan of Rails either, you know. So you probably know me because I speak at quite a lot of conferences here. I also a lead of Rust Ukraine. Unfortunately, the logo is not visible, but it's looking great. And and also, I'm one of the most active members of our chat community. If you go to github.com/dev-ua, you'll see a bunch of chats covering different topics, and there is a Ruby UA chat, for example, front-end UA chat, and stuff like that. And there is one for Rust. There is no one for Crystal yet, but I assume we'll get one pretty soon. Like I said, I speak at many conferences, and mostly about like JavaScript and all that. But here we are talking about Ruby. We know that Ruby is nice. We know that some parts of Ruby are not that great, right? And I have a confession. I have never been paid to write a single line of Ruby. In fact, I had 6 days total of experience writing Ruby before starting to prepare for this talk. But those 6 days, they were during 2 ICFP programming contests in 2011 and 2012. Does anybody know what ICFPC is? A few people know. So it's the contest it's happening worldwide. It takes 3 days and nights. You can have a team of any size. You can be like a solo developer. You can be like a member of a huge team. And you get only one problem to solve. And the problem is usually hard. For example, this one is fun one. You have a program, and you have an API, and you can ask if I pass these arguments to a program, what the results would be. And your goal is to guess a program. And you have to guess several thousands of such programs, and programs are written in Lisp for convenience, right? So in 2011, I used 187, I remember that. In 2012, I used 191, and we also started writing tests because it was awesome. And the guy, Vlad Gorodetsky, who is organizing RubyShift and some other conferences and meetups around Europe, helped us with that. I'm also a proud friend of Ruby Together. This is an organization that collects donations to support development of bundler, Ruby gems, and Ruby infrastructure. So, despite the fact that I've never been paid to write Ruby, I'm actually paying for Ruby to stay alive, because I believe that Ruby is important, and I'm thinking about it in terms of ecosystems. If you look at one easy way to compare ecosystems of different programming languages is to count the number of modules that are there, right? NPM is a king because it's the largest ecosystem. It's the fastest growing ecosystem, and right now they are about 50% ahead of anybody else. And by the end of the year, they will be like 2.5 times bigger than anybody else. But most modules on NPM are small. They're competing with each other. There is an evolution of programming style, the evolution of coding practices, and there is a lot of churn. That means that if you picked a bunch of libraries to build a project on JavaScript, there is a high possibility that, say, 3-4 years from now, most of those libraries will be considered either dead or impractical to use or just unfortunate, right? The second largest ecosystem is Marvin, which is very close to Ruby gems, but there is also occurs of repackaged modules. Different companies repackage the same pieces of code over and over again and renaming them by their names. But also, most of these libraries have very, very broad applicability. There are tons of stuff. You want to write banking system, you can do it in Java. You want to talk to robots, you can do it in Java. You want to run inside a SIM card on your phone, you do it in Java, and over again. And they try to reinvent the universe in a sense that they're running inside this beefy virtual machine, the best virtual machine out there, but this virtual machine tends to consume all the resources of the servers, and people operate in a world inside this virtual machine instead of like dealing with it like we usually do with Unix systems and all that. There is a Python ecosystem which is actually like 40% smaller than Ruby gems, and there are tons of stuff about web there, but they also do quite a few libraries for scientific research, for number crunching, and tons of stuff for better Perl. A lot of people decided that they want to write their scripts in Python instead of Perl. So if say 15 years ago there were tons of horrible scripts written in Perl, today there are even more scripts, even larger number of scripts, as horrible as Perl scripts, but written in Python. And then finally we have Ruby gems, which is like mostly about Rails and mostly about web development in general. And it has more than 100,000 modules. And someone said that like 90% of that is web, right? So Ruby today is the best platform for building server-side web apps, for building APIs, for building traditional applications. It's just miles and miles ahead of everybody else. So yesterday people were talking about bust factor. If something happens to the core team, if something happens to the framework, we will be doomed, right? But at the same time, we already so far ahead that the doom will not happen. By the time we'll start feeling the fact that the bus hit David, I hope that never happens. But by the time we start feeling that, different people will pick it up. And that's why I believe in ultimate superiority of Rails on a server above everything else that exists. You may not agree. I've never, like I said, I've never wrote a line of Ruby, so whatever. When I speak about it, I usually think in my head about like this division that we have between common pieces and custom pieces. Most of the websites are not written with frameworks. They are written with CMSs. Most of the APIs today, it seems to me, are written from scratch, but I believe that we shouldn't do that. There should be CMSs for API development. And we have apps, traditional apps, we have APIs, and you can think about it like this, like four squares. Common at the top, custom at the bottom, API on the right, traditional web on the left. And the great thing about Rails is that although originally it was on the down left corner, it's actually moving up and up and up. There are so many third-party modules, so many libraries that it's almost indistinguishable from CMSs and from backend as a services today, and the new stuff that they're adding for APIs development support helps Rails to move over to the center, to the API side as well. And Rails 5 is doing something like that. It's gonna be, these are baby steps, but these are right steps in the right direction. And I am actually pretty excited about what's coming in Rails 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? So I've been talking about this evolution. right? And JavaScript is also very, very known for its evolutionary nature. Some people praise it, some people think that it's actually a very, very bad thing about it. I've mentioned churn, I've mentioned competition, I've mentioned evolution, but I believe that we can live in an environment when we have evolution without extinction, without some libraries disappearing completely. They can merge, they can transform, they can move over without actually dying over. Some of you might know these names, right? Some of you know these are our past, this is our present, right? But and for many people, React, Ember, and Angular is this new thing. But even after React, we already got tons and tons of names. I just put some that are relatively known to the community. Have you heard of any of them? Most likely no. Very few people on this corner knew, right? But I'll be talking about Ember, because Ember is all about evolution and all without stagnation. The major feature of Ember, the most important feature of Ember, is not what it can do, but how it develops. Ember does rolling releases, similar to Ubuntu, twice a year, similar to web browsers, every 6 months, every 6 weeks. We also have this 6-week cycle. Every 6 weeks, we decide to put new features, and they're living in a beta channel that we can use. Some of them, after beta cycle, would get to the next release. Some of them that takes longer, they will move over to the next betas and so on. As we're moving from releases to releases, we deprecate things, and this red pile starts to grow up. And at some point in future, actually 2 weeks from now, less than 2 weeks from now, we'll have a major breaking release. And what will happen, we remove everything that is deprecated. And that will reduce the size of the framework. But some features that we want to deprecate, they're actually so important that we decide to not to deprecate them. And instead, we remove them from the framework and move them to the plugins, and they will continue living for some time. And that means that if you're moving with this train, then with every release, you will be welcomed with like 3-4 deprecations. You fix them, and as you move over, you are not afraid of the major release, of the breaking changes, because those breaking changes wouldn't be breaking for you. It's always backward compatible. Everything gets deprecated for the full cycle, and the full cycle takes almost 2 years. Moving from 1.0 to 2.0 took us 2 years, maybe 3.0 will come in, say, 1 year or something. But that's the most important feature. If you pick Ember today, you know that 3 years from now, your framework will be different, but you will never have to rewrite it completely from start to finish. So these are values of Ember, and they are looking very, very familiar. Conversion of a configuration, productivity first, principle of least surprise, tooling and add-ons, and no backward compatibility above all things, and no single corporate sponsor, similar to how Linux, PostgreSQL, and Ruby on Rails projects are run. And there is that principle, 20 versus 80. If a feature is very, very common, this feature should be part of the framework. Maybe not the framework itself, maybe a very, very popular plugin, but the general idea is this. You need animations, there is a plugin for that. You need routing, there is a feature for that, and so on and so forth. So Ember is a Rails of front-end world, and Ember ecosystem is very, very active. It's relatively small. We have not 100,000 gems. So far we have a bit over 1,000 add-ons. But we have command line tools, and we have a beautiful, beautiful Ember inspector that works in every browser. Even on mobile browsers, you can do remote debugging with it. One big step is Ember Data plus adapters, and it's something that people were complaining about Ember for a long, long time because they were breaking compatibility. Right now, everything is relatively good. We got the standard of JSON API like 2 days ago, and 2 weeks from now, most libraries will be compatible with this standard and will move forward with the standard. Tons of add-ons, everything you need, stuff like that. And there are 2 resources where you can look for them. So Ember plus Rails, I believe it's the ultimate productivity stack, the best one. And I wanted you to show how it looks like to build an app in Ember. And like, alert, right? So my setup, I use CHRuby, Ruby install because I heard that this is like the most hip thing. And I found this small thing from the same guy that basically gives me ability to install gems locally and all that. So I created Ruby like this because I don't need tons of stuff, right? And I just created an Ember CLI project. There is a question, should we put them in one repository or in 2 repositories? I believe they should be separate. And people always complain about like MVC plus MVC, you have MVC in my MVC, so you can view controllers while viewing controllers. But on your Rails side, you got tons of stuff, and you usually don't write your logic in controllers or in models. You usually find some other place. You invent very, very interesting names for these places. And on our side, on Ember's side, it's the same thing, MVC, but actually, we don't write views, we write components, right? And actually, controller is not that important because we got a beautiful router. And in fact, we did need a controller for almost 2 years. And most people don't still write them, but they're actually not needed. And models, sometimes these are models, but more often these are just like JSON schemas for your backend API. So it's like schema component router, like MVC, SCR, what the fuck, right? So basically there is this scheme, there is this plan. You use a router, the nested router, and any framework, and when you get to a route, you would have a hierarchy of components there. And that's how we build applications in Ember, in Angular 2.0, in React. That's like the state of the art for us, for front-end developers. And although they are called single-page apps, I'm not super happy about this. So they're like single-load, multi-page applications because we had a router. And we use Rails as an API, something like that. So some primer on Ember. Routing components and Ember Data are 3 things that are kind of important from coding perspective. And I would like to cover token-based authorization, because if you have 2 repositories, we usually deploy our applications differently. You would have, say, www.myproduct.com, which is your like traditional Rails site with device, with billing, with all that. You would have API.yourapp.com, and you would have app, yourapp.com, and app would be a single-page application. So API and the app would be on different domains, and that means that using cookies is incredibly dangerous because of CSRF, and because of that, token-based auth is something that is relatively interesting to do. So I'm switching to the code. I don't know. I can write it. Would you like me to write it? Or I could cherry pick it, right? So I have 2 repositories. Let me check. This is my client. This is my server. If I start my client right now, if I start my server right now, you wouldn't get too excited. This is Rust logo, Rust Ukraine. So this should be клиент не стартанул. Up. It says npm install missing packages. Yep. Whatever, guys. I was shocked to learn that in order to record a video, I had to turn off the Wi-Fi, and because of that, I don't know if I'll be able to install anything. Npm install. Because I have them in cache, so it might work. But it's actually pretty strange. Wait a second. I know what is happening. I know what is happening. That's server. That's client. I know what's happening. This one. Cherry pick. Yay. Hello? All right, we are running. Okay. So this is a client. And this is a server. Right, server looks familiar. Client should look. Что? Окей, сейчас подожди. Oh, welcome to Ember. So let me do this like this and like this. So we have two things. Okay. And давай, держи. Спасибо. And here's our Ember inspector, like with deprecations, with data, with the routing, with view tree, and all that. So what we want to do, we want to show like simple API, simple CRUD thing. So what I do for that, I would do very simple routing. Cherry pick. All right. And if I go in now, and I'll go to tasks. Что за фигня? Блин. Фокус не проходит. А была идея такая. Что делать? Есть. Okay. So we won't see the evolution of that, and instead, what we're gonna do is check out this.
Pair programming in real time.
It's pair microphoning in real time, I would say, right? So in this case, we'll have to switch to both RubyC client and the server to that branch. Check out. All right. Okay. So we'll start with a client, which is like a simple Ember app. And Ember app is built on conventions. You go in here and you see the structure of the code that we have, the structure of your app that we have. This very compact notation actually covers three things. First, how are our individual components allocated. Second, how our routes are combined. And third, the nesting. Nested lines mean nested resources. When I switch to from task list to task new, I get to, I see both the list and the new task inside. When I switch to login, I do not see the task list, which is kind of convoluted as, to my taste, but it's very, very compact. As a result, we have very, very few folders that matters. Application usually have some global stuff, right? And we would have stuff for our routes. And you will see the theme that each folder has two files, route and template. Route talks about how we load data, how we decide how to show this data, and template is just a template, what will be seen when we go to that URL. It's very convenient because as your program grow, you just add more and more and more routes to your program. Oops, that's the wrong file, right? And if you discuss a feature with a customer, you actually can predict how many routes would be there based on the user interaction. And based on that, you could imagine how many files you would write. And based on the UI, you could think about how complicated these templates would be. And based on that, you can just add all this together and give a customer pretty good estimate about how long the task will take for an average Ember developer in your team. Like I said, Ember is all about add-ons. When you run your application, when you run your application, you have this Ember CLI tool, right? Similar to what you see in Rails. And you would actually get tons of stuff, tons of generators, add-on installers, and all that. And so I installed several add-ons like this. And if you go to package.json, you will see them. One of them is very interesting for Rails people because it's called Ember JSON API. It's a very small thing that tries to adjust current Ember data and active model serializers to the common ground. Active model serializers support JSON API version 1.0 RC4. Ember Data support RC3, and they are a little bit different. So you see the theme here. This little guy is actually helping that up. And another thing is simple authorization and simple authorization with OAuth 2. This is the plugin that we're using to talk to the server. So speaking about the JSON API first, it's just a small adapter that I use, right? And a small serializer that changes a very small thing about the difference between RC3 and RC4. 2 weeks from now, it wouldn't be matter, I believe. But right now, it's something we have to do. If you go to Rails side of things, right? And I open a gem file for you. You will see like I have very little stuff in here. I have Rails API, which is like API stuff. I have active model serializers from master, and I have rec course basically to turn off course because Rails is very good at protecting against CSRF. And I also use Doorkeeper, which is an auth gateway for Rails. It's incredibly powerful thing. Basically, most code that I wrote in this app is in Doorkeeper, and it's very heavily documented about how to do things. This is the only like line of business that actually matters, right? I want to find a user, check if, and try to authenticate. I don't know if try is okay thing. Maybe it's a bad practice to do that, right? But anything else doesn't really matter. One small thing here is I enable password authorization because I want to authorize without client ID and client secret, because for front-end applications, for single-page applications, that doesn't really make much sense since they are on a JavaScript side and can be stolen. And other than that, there were no. Okay, I commented out one line of code here. And as you might expect, users are very, very simple, has secure password and all that. And what else? I don't remember what else I did. On the client side, getting auth working together with the server is also extremely easy to do. You have a config, right? What's inside config? Maybe environment.js instead of environment.rb, right? And inside environment.js, I basically added these 3 lines of code. One is saying that I would like to use auth bear for authorization and auth token for authentication, right? And also I whitelist this source to be able to communicate with my API from that. And with that, I can basically log in, log out, and all that. So I believe I have a user here. If I go to oh, I believe I have to do npm install. And it won't work because we are recording right now. So, oh, okay. How about you? All right. How about you then? All right. And what about now? Come on, come on. The only thing you would keep from this lecture is that the fact that Ember is slow, right? Okay. All right. So I have a login, and I have to actually enter real username and password, because otherwise all right. Let's look at the network. Our token is dead with 500. Okay. Let's check it up. What happened here? А это из-за чего может быть? Я просто сделал... О! All right. Fix it in real time. Где? And we got 500. I don't know. Worked this morning, just before I joined, just before I connected. Yeah, I should have used Docker. That's the answer for all these microservices. Anyway, I don't know what to say after that, because you see, I had a wonderful demo that didn't work out as well as I planned. Maybe we have some questions. Hey. Awesome.
Have you tried even once to migrate your old legacy application from, I don't know, Ruby or PHP to Ember? In what steps you done, or you completely rewrite it? Maybe you have some.
Yes, I did, but for Java. Does it work for you?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, okay. So the story is that if you start learning Ember, they will all tell you about this routing thing, right? Like I did. So they will tell you that you have to start your application somewhere. You have to allocate an area on the screen that will be powered by Ember. That would be like the only thing that runs with Ember. And you will get routes inside and all that. The fact is that if you just open up if you just open up.
I am not commented that.
Yeah, there was some music there, don't worry. Yeah, you won't be able to open up. But basically, you can just have a page with a component. And that component, what Ember does, it creates all the objects that you haven't defined yourself, and it will provide you with a default implementation. And the default implementation, if you only have components, is to give you one big route that basically manages the global state for your components. And from that global state, you can send actions, you can send events, you can also subscribe to DOM events and just or plain old JavaScript events, and just continue to communicate with the rest of your system. So people think about moving to Ember, you have to move from top to bottom, but in fact you will be much better off with moving from bottom to top. So you would pick certain locations inside your application and you would wrap them in Ember components, and you would transform them from a simple big Ember components to a smaller granular components, more structured, better understood, better tested. I haven't shown you the testing part of the story, but it's very, very easy. And with that, you would have these islands of Ember in your app. And once you moved most of your app to islands, you can consolidate these islands into one big route-driven application. That's the way I strongly suggest. It's also very easy to start doing routing on query params first. So all this routing that I showed you, it's actually path-based. So you would have some parameters here, right? Path ID, right? And your route would be task / and some path ID. But you can also have query parameters here, not in the routing, but on a controller layer. And you can have routing for opening and closing dialogues, or moving, showing and hiding different parts of your system first. And you wouldn't have to introduce this big thing until the very, very late. And there is a plugin for Ember CLI that is called Ember Islands that actually allows you to write these islands inside an Ember CLI project. So you would have an Ember CLI project, you would describe components of your system, and that would help you eventually move to this whole thing. You would be able to run tests with a test runner. You would be able to install third-party components with this, and you would be able to upgrade to newer and newer versions of Ember as they come out. Hey. Why it doesn't run?
Hi. If I try to make choice between Ember JS and Angular JS,
yeah.
Could you say me about pros and cons?
Angular is the best, to my mind, is the best framework for what I. No. I'm not that guy. Remember that single-page applications versus single-load multi-page. So if you don't have a router, if you don't have like big transitions, you are pretty good with Angular, and it's a sweet spot. It's what they actually show on all the demos until very recent time, and that works surprisingly well. So you can have a very big system with a traditional Rails, say, based routing. So if you switch to dashboard, you will get full page refresh. If you switch to something else, you would get full page refresh. But inside that, you would have a rich application. Think of that as of, say, I'll close it down, like this, right? So this is a very complex application that doesn't have any, that has almost no navigation at all. This is a good sweet spot for Angular. If you are building something that looks like, I don't know, that looks like this, with like many tabs, with many nested things, right? And you would like narrow down your context to something deep, and in this deep area, you would have some rich interaction. That's a sweet spot for Ember.
Why?
Because you have this this awesome router, which is miles ahead of any other router in JavaScript. Basically, it's a bit better than React router. It's much better than router in Angular 2.0 and UI router. There are just tons of small little things here and there that you will feel in a larger application, and you will use a large application all over the place.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Well, more questions.
Hi, can you tell us about what are those new framework you mentioned today, and the general trends in JavaScript MVC framework development?
Yeah. So the trend. First of all, there is this big three, right? Whatever. Yeah, these three. And they will persist. Angular 1.0, there are tons of projects on Angular 1.0, and there are new projects starting on Angular 1.0 every day. And even today, it's larger than anything else. It's larger than Angular 2, it's larger than React, it's larger than Ember. But that's like Java. Would you write Java? Maybe not, maybe yes, right? So that's kind of the big beast that everybody is using, and everybody is complaining about, right? React is a hot new thing. It's like NPM, basically, like Node.js. Every day you get a new library, a new stack on top of React, and people would claim that it's like a game changer, and the community at large is just like trying to figure out what's the perfect stack. And Ember is about productivity today and about pragmatism. For a while, Ember was the slowest of all these threes, right? But at the same time, everybody knew that, say in January, we all knew that, most of us knew that 6, 8, 9 months from now, Ember will just magically become faster because of this rolling releases. And also, if in React you have this culture of like competition, like everybody is trying to make a new thing, it's his own variant of a new thing. On Ember, people tend to combine their efforts. There was a project called Ember CLI Deploy, and it was designed to deploy your Ember applications to some production cloud environment, to CDNs, to anything, right? And there were 3 projects like this, and one day they just decided to merge. And mergers like this happen all the time. And that's one of the reasons why, for example, the community is small, so they try to focus, right? They try not to compete with each other and instead collaborate in order to outcompete the other 2 guys. Those new, these ones, they are very, very small and surprisingly small, because what they're trying to do, they're trying to piggyback on some ideas that React introduced and try to make it even smaller, even faster, even more concise, even more beautiful. But the adoption is nowhere near here. It's like the best programming languages, say like Haskell or Rust or something like that, which are like much better than anything we use today in our day-to-day life, but we don't use them for some unknown reason.
Okay, anybody else? No, okay, Andrey?
There is one on the back.
Okay.
Hi, I would like to ask, how do you test an Ember interface? And
Oh, that's very, very nice, very cool thing. I'll try to show you how it's done. It's here, all right. All right, it's probably very small, right? Whatever. Ember G acceptance. Test. Login. All right. And you would get an acceptance test somewhere. How it was called? Login test, okay? Login test. So what you have here is a small like DSL. You can write visit to go to different URLs. You can say like click, fill in, like press the button, all that, move mouse. You can have your custom helpers. They are asynchronous, but they look synchronous. So at certain points, you can have these blocks of and then. That means that every asynchronous step that happens before should complete by the time you run this assert. The most important thing about it is that it looks like an acceptance, like UI test that your QA team would write, right? But they would write them in Selenium or like WebDriver or something like that. And that means that every such event, like please click the button, or would cause a round trip between your browser and the WebDriver. And back. Here, these helpers are actually running inside the application, and that means that these tests are actually running at the speed of unit tests. And you can have a lot of them. You can describe your interaction with that. There is support for mocks, for mocking your backend, for stubbing your backend, for spying on your backend. And there are also like unit test stubs that are created all the time, right? For example, you can test your adapters test your serializers. That's one thing that we should have tested, because you see inside the serializer we have some custom logic that we wrote. Right? I'm not a big fan of testing the third-party components and like how they interact with each other, but this is like custom code that I had to write. I had to come up with it. I had to like think about it. That's something I would write a test for. And it's very, very nice. Most Ember projects have more tests. More Ember projects have tests than in any other framework, and most Ember projects have quite a larger test suite than other frameworks do.
Okay, I think we haven't any time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Andrey.
Yeah. I'll try to demo it on my machine if you are super interested, and the source code will be, of course, online. If you'll ever have an issue like trying to connect from any framework, not Ember, but to any framework to your OAuth backend, that's something that you could just take a look and take home with you.
Great. Thank you, Andrey.